Hi, this is Kim. Um, I'm making these vlogs as I share my process of walking through obsessive compulsive disorder. I've been also writing a blog, working through all the dimensions and relationships involved in how I created this disorder for myself as I walk myself through the thick of it and eventually out of it. The topic I wanted to talk about in this vlog is an aspect of the cycles, or the vicious cycle we talk about when looking into obsessive compulsive disorder and however it's expressed. For example, obsessive rituals, and then for me specifically skin picking. There's also cutting, hair pulling, nail biting, many different varieties. And this vicious cycle, the aspect of the vicious cycle that I wanted to talk about are the highs and lows. A lot of time I've noticed that it's easier for me to resist. It's easier for me to not participate in the disorder. And at other points it seems impossible to not participate in it. And I wanted to talk about how this is also an aspect of the vicious cycle that contributes to the continuation of the disorder. Because if you think about it, it's an accumulating process wherein we accumulate the internal energies and reactions and create this almost toxic internal environment which is escaped through participation in the disorder, and it feels like a relief. So the cycle is that you have the process of building up this internal environment, and then there's the release, and then you feel better, and then you go right slowly down back into the low, which eventually needs to be released again. And this release is achieved through participation in the disorder. Writing out this disorder has been extremely difficult for me because of the absolute fear I experience towards the thought of not having this release. Because imagining my existence in the constant state that I create for myself is something that I consciously or subconsciously avoid with every fiber of my being. There was a point where I wasn't even able to imagine life without OCD because that thought was too terrifying. Because I know that when I don't participate in it, it builds up. And so the thought of not having OCD leads me to imagine a life of that constant buildup with no release. So the obvious angle to take here would be to look at what is causing the internal environment. What choices, action or inaction, contribute to these reactions that we build up. And then taking measures to stop and release them in a way that doesn't contribute to just having them build up again. It's stopping and releasing them in a way that is permanent. Whereas participating in the disorder is a very temporary solution, allowing for a release that makes life livable. If we didn't have that release, we would have to face this internal environment, but we don't have the tools to do so. That's why I use self-forgiveness, because it's an actual release. And within the process of self-forgiveness is the scripting of a change in behavior. What's interesting about self-forgiveness is that I find people have the tendency to reject it. I had 2 conversations recently with people where they were telling me about how they forgave someone in their life. One was a person forgiving his father, and one was a person forgiving her mother. And both of them, at separate times, expressed the fact that upon forgiving this significant individual in their lives, they released themselves of a burden and were able to create a new relationship with that person because they forgave them. The predictable outcome of forgiving yourself would be the same. You release the burden that you hold within yourself to and towards yourself and create a new relationship with yourself. So why is self-forgiveness so difficult? I asked one of these individuals whether he would be able to forgive himself, seeing as he was able to forgive his father, and he was unable to do so. In this way, forgiving ourselves is the best gift we could possibly give ourselves, yet we feel undeserving of it. But if we don't forgive ourselves, then we continue to carry this burden, this self-relationship that is in fact toxic. And this self-relationship perpetuates the perception that we're undeserving of forgiveness because we are in fact doing it to ourselves. At any point, we can simply make the decision to forgive, release, and recreate the relationship we have with ourselves. But that would entail facing what we've done, facing the relationship we've created thus far with ourselves. That's why the necessary aspect of self-forgiveness is to redefine and recreate this self-relationship. Because if you forgive yourself and then you continue to do it, obviously the forgiveness is ineffective. And you won't develop the self-trust and the self-worth that is developed through actual change, through proving to yourself that you are able to value yourself in such a way where you make self-change, actual self-change, a reality. And this is a tool that is learnable and is able to be developed by anyone. So, going back to the cycles, there's the cycle that allows for the perpetuation of the disorder, where the release is not a supportive release. It is actually contributing to the continuation of the disorder. Because it makes the disorder sustainable, because you have moments where you feel empowered and you feel relief. And however, the way that you got to that point was through participating in the disorder itself. And so when you get back down to the low, you can always hold this remembrance of the release and simply wait for it to come again. You then experience the release as a temporary relief, with full knowing that we're just going to fall right back into it. Whereas with self-forgiveness, it's practicing releasing even at the low points, therefore stopping the cycle and creating actual stability, wherein even in a low point, you're able to take steps towards releasing the buildup and walking towards stability, instead of releasing the buildup and walking towards another fall. So the common sense within this is to realize that obsessive compulsive disorder does exist in cycles, and fooling oneself with the perception that the cycles that sustain the disorder, which include periods of strength, periods of weakness, periods of release, periods of buildup, are not actual change. It's not actual walking towards a stability. It is merely sustaining the disorder. And within that, we have to consider the absolute fear of not having the disorder, in which case we would have to face that which we create. And that thought is enough to make people reject self-forgiveness. However, the real change that self-forgiveness enables, this releasing of the burden, this accepting self, this allowing self to actually be able to change through accepting self despite the fact that despite what we've done to ourselves and how we've abused ourselves in so many ways, and then following that acceptance with actual commitment to change, in which case we're building ourselves anew, redefining our relationship with ourselves in a way that's supportive, in a way that values and honors ourselves, in a way that walks us towards stability instead of the ups and downs of the vicious cycle that perpetuates and sustains the disorder. Thank you.